this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it. Gage Walker, the running back, on 3rd and 2. They hand it to Walker. He's got the first down, cuts it right up the seam. Walker inside the 10. Walker rolls over the pylon. Touchdown, Western Kentucky. Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser. 11 for 11 in the biggest kick of his life.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The week is finally here. This is the preview episode that our football season basically revolves around. There have been a lot of people wondering all week long, when the heck is this episode getting put up? Because it's getting awful daggone close to game day, and I don't have my Moonshine Throwdown preview yet. Well, we're going to make it happen. It's a little late in the week, but hey, it is what it is. Better late than never. We got a lot of good information for you. There's going to be a ton of great discussion. Follow us on Twitter at MoonshineTD if you don't already, where you've been the last 6 years. Follow the podcast at MSTD_podcast. You can get that anywhere you get a podcast. But look, if you're listening to the show, it's probably going to be on Spotify or iHeartRadio. And we just submitted the show to Amazon Podcasts. So waiting for approval for that. So any day now, you should be able to go, Alexa, play the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, and bam, she's going to make it happen for you. So let's get into this 2020 Moonshine Throwdown homecoming edition for the Toppers. Last year, it was a 2019 Moonshine Throwdown homecoming edition for the Herd. Role reversals once again, as seems to be the case in so many of the storylines that in this rivalry from the last 6 years. This show this week, man, I don't know. We got tons of stuff to talk about. Trace, I got Steven. The whole gang is here. The game, of course, is going down this Saturday, October 10th, 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 Central. It'll be on Stadium. A lot of people, I don't know for what reason, don't like Stadium, but I like Stadium. They love the game itself. They love the rivalry. They always do us a good job. And even when it's a non-Moonshine Throwdown broadcast, they do a really good job. They're very, very easy to listen to, and the production value is pretty darn good. But, of course, hell, anything's going to beat watching it on Facebook. If you don't have cable, like I don't have cable, we do a lot of streaming. So I do know that a couple of free streaming type channels that you can find will have Stadium. Now, whether or not it'll be playing the Marshall Western Moonshine Throwdown is another thing. It could be a regional thing, but you can find Stadium live on Pluto TV, and if you use a Roku streaming device on the Roku channel, they also have the live version of Stadium. It's available a myriad of other places as well, but those two I know for sure will have it. I've watched Western games and I've watched Marshall games both on both Pluto TV and the Roku channel versions of Stadium. Power Index this week, guys, loves the Herd. Kind of surprising. 78.8% chance to win for the Herd in an away game. Herd has bumped that spread up to -7.5. Earlier in the week, it opened at like 2 points. So if you got in on that, you might stand to win a little cash either way. But now we're up to 7.5. Over-under on the game has dropped about 10 points. It's now sitting at 44.5 points per game, which I tried to do the math and get the spread right and the over-under right, and it looks like Vegas likes Marshall in a 26-18 victory, which is a weird score, but whatever. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the good stuff. This is the 12th all-time meeting between Western Kentucky and Marshall. Marshall owns the all-time series 7-4, but in the Moonshine Throwdown era, this is the 7th meeting. Series is tied 3-3, so series bragging rights are on the line. Marshall has won the last 3, which means, of course, Western won the first 3, 2014 through 2016. Toppers also nabbed 2 conference titles in that era as well. Marshall got theirs. Marshall, the last three, 17, 18, and 19, all tight games. 2 of those in Huntington, 1 in Bowling Green by a combined 13 points. 13 points in margin of victory in the total of the 3 games. Last 2 by 3 points, and 2017 was by 7. Doc Holliday is 3-3, of course, in Moonshine Throwdown games. He's been there for all of them, and he's 1-1 in Bowling Green. Tyson Helton, 0-1 in the Moonshine Throwdown. Of course, we all know how last year's ended in Huntington in walk-off fashion. Justin Rowasser, the whole series in sequence, some fans will take to their grave that it was delay of game, that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. The whole everything, that Justin Rowasser turning to the topper bench and letting him know that he's got ice water in his veins. The timeouts were not going to affect him. Then he nails the third 53-yarder, walk-off fashion, turns, gives a kiss to the crowd, a bow, and a legend is born. So Tyson Helton in games in Bowling Green, Moonshine Throwdowns in Bowling Green, 0-0. This will be his first crack at it. As I mentioned before, it's homecoming for the Tops, originally scheduled to be a Halloween homecoming with Old Dominion, but they decided to sit on the sidelines for 2020, and the 10/31 game date got to become an away game in Provo, Utah against monster BYU this year. So the weather for the game not looking very promising, 66 degrees in the evening, since we're looking at a just after sunset kickoff, currently 75% chance of heavy rain. You're going to get some remnants from Hurricane Delta all the way up there in Bowling Green, and we're going to get relatively high winds. We're looking at 25 mile an hour with some gusts I've seen as high as 40 to 45 miles an hour. Yowza. Let's hope that doesn't sustain, but it looks like it might. All right, on the season, guys, it's time to talk ball. Western Kentucky 1-2 on the season, 1-0 in conference. They just beat Middle Tennessee. Real sorry we couldn't get you a wrap-up of that game, but the Toppers did get the win 20-17 over Middle Tennessee State. And, of course, Marshall 2-0 has not played a game in conference. Guys, before we talk stats, Trace, since you're rip-roaring and ready to go here, talk to me about the 2020 Moonshine Throwdown. What excites you about it? The big question is, are you going to be making that mythical first trip across state lines into Kentucky and maybe meet some of your podcast fans here, pal? Are you going to be making the trip? Let's talk to me about the game.
Don't put that kind of pressure on me, first of all.
No, the pressure's on. Forget that. It's 6 years.
Yeah,
the pressure is on.
Well, it'll be I told y'all before, it'll be a surprise one way or the other. So we'll see if I'm there or not. It's up in the air, but we'll see.
Game time decision.
It's a game time decision. That's exactly what it is.
Are you waiting on COVID results to return before you're cleared to travel? Is that what it is?
No, I'm not for that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll just say. But as far as the game goes, though, I mean, what couldn't you be excited about? I mean, it's literally the Moonshine Throwdown. Like, it's every single year. It's one of the most exciting games of the year for both teams, if not the most exciting game of the year for both teams. I mean, last year, I think that was a highlight of Marshall's season, was that win against Western on the game-winning field goal. I think that was the highlight of the season. I think it was a phenomenal game. I think everybody thought it the same thing, and like it's what you come to expect from this game at this point. I mean, every year it's a very competitive game. At least in recent years, it's been that. I mean, not a whole lot of difference at times between the teams. Just really good stuff. I mean, and I'm here. From the Marshall perspective, I think you have to worry about that big layoff. I mean, it's been about 3 weeks since they played. I feel like will play a little bit of a factor. I mean, it's rust is a thing, especially with that long of a layoff. It's just not normal in the landscape of a college football season to have a 3-week layoff. It's just not. I mean, yeah, it's the COVID era and everything, but like it's just not. You're not used to it. I know coaches don't look forward to it, having to keep a team focused for that long, and the fact that they haven't played in, like I said, about 3 weeks, and they're going on the road at a rival and potentially really bad elements. It's could be dicey, especially early if they don't figure out, some of the kinks in the armor. If they don't get going fast enough, that could spell some trouble for them. So that's one of my biggest things to take away immediately from this game. But, I mean, of course, you got to be excited for it. I mean, Marshall's off to a fantastic start. top 25 caliber team so far. Should still be ranked. I don't give a crap what the voters say. That's just the way it is, I think. And if they win this game, though, especially if they could somehow win it convincingly, then that would be very good for their chances to get back in the top 25 if people lose. But can't put the cart before the horse, as they say. So I don't really care if it's 1 point or 50 points. I don't give a crap. Just get the win. That's all that matters.
Let me ask you one question. I know, people will probably think that we're biased on this podcast because we represent who we represent. But honestly, I think we do a really good job of being honest and open and giving a true opinion, not just a herd homer or a topper homer's opinion. Is this, in your opinion, the marquee game, at least in the regular season in the Conference USA?
I think it is. I mean, is there one that you immediately think of that people are like genuinely excited about within Conference USA, unless you're a fan of that
even
game?
Even outside of these two fan bases, do you think other people look at this game and go, this is going to be one of the best games, if not the best game in the conference this year?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I've made this point before, is it seems like every year this game has pretty big meaning, pretty big significance outside of just being a rivalry. I mean, last year it was a battle for first place in the East, mid-season, about around Halloween time, big game that turned the tide in the division at that point. And then the year before, same thing, Marshall's first game in conference. I think it was Western's first game in conference that year. So, it was about starting on the right foot in conference. 2017, it was the blackout game. I mean, it goes on and on. So, every year it seems like this game has significance beyond just the rivalry, but it helps that it also has the rivalry feel no matter what the situation is. If it's a rivalry, it's important. But it does help that there's also other circumstances surrounding the game to help make it even more important than it already is. So, Yes, in my opinion, no doubt.
Absolutely. This game always has more than just bragging rights on the line. Steve, let's get Steven in here now. Steve, I know you're going to be going to the game because you're picking me up from the airport on tomorrow evening. So, Steven and I will be basically joined at the hip this weekend. So where you see one, you will see the other most likely. Since I can definitely speak and say that he will be at the game because I will be at the game. If you see us or if you think it is us, I mean, Steven's basically the mayor of Bowling Green. Everybody knows him. So if you see the vice deputy mayor along with him, don't be afraid to come up and say, hey, don't be afraid to, just shoot the crap with us for a minute, because look, every time I come to Bowling Green, I meet new people. I have a great time. They're always so hospitable. I can't wait to see some old friends and make some new friends. So Steve, come on in. Let's talk about this. What are you liking about the 2020 Moonshine Throwdown, aside from the fact that we might be really, really wet during game time?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try to stay dry. We'll try to find a dry spot somewhere. But, the football game, obviously Western got off to a rougher start to the season than we would have liked to seen. But we saw some good things against Middle Tennessee. It really reminded me of the progression we saw last year of Ty Story, and just beginning to get some continuity with the wide receivers, the running backs, and just some drives that were sustained, points put on the board. You saw the running game start to get some traction. And it also, doesn't hurt from this perspective to see that Marshall has been off for 3 weeks. Coming off a bye week, I don't think Doc has a stellar record coming off bye weeks. Has been known to come out and shoot some blanks. So, that could very well vote in our favor. Now, the rainy game and windy is going to lend itself to a very probably ground and pound attack for both teams. That very well could favor Marshall. I mean, their offensive line and the reigning Conference USA Player of the Year on the offensive side, and Brendan Knox. I mean, those are going to be a tough task for our defense. So, looking forward to a good game. Throw all the lines and the point spreads and who's favored and who should win. Throw all that stuff out the window. It's going to be tough. There's going to be some tense moments in the game. And really, I think whoever plays the cleanest ball and penalties, turnovers, I think that's who's going to get the W.
I've been saying the same thing. It's all going to come down in a nasty, murky, slippery game. If that's what we end up having, it's going to come down to penalties and turnovers and whose line can push whose line around. But you mentioned it, Doc Holliday does not have a stellar record coming off of bye weeks, and several of those times, he's come off a bye week and played Western, or well, actually maybe just once. I remember Western coming off of a bye a couple times and getting Jeff Brom getting 2 weeks to prepare for Marshall like he needed it. But anyway, I digress. Now I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Trace. Do you think this game has become the marquee game, not just to our fan bases, not just to the circle of folks that follow us on social media, but really to a lot of those, some of those other Conference USA fans of other teams? Do you think they look at this and go, man, this is probably going to be the best game that their team's not playing in? Let's put it that way. In the conference?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, there's a couple other good, decent rivalries, but just the consistency of these two teams and where they've been. Short of both of our teams having a 3-win season in the last 5-6 years, they've basically consistently always been at the top. Have had fun offenses, good defenses, just have always had good star marquee players, much like you mentioned on the Red Towel Radio earlier. Marquee players that have made plays and gone on to the next level and still playing. It's just always a good football game. Whether we're ranked or not ranked, whatever. It's the last two games have literally come down to the last play of the game. A strip sack 2 years ago. Rohrwasser last year kicking those 53-yarders, whether you agree with it or not that he should have been kicking practice kicks, the dude was nailing those kicks. So much, respect for that. They won the ball game. That's how it shook out. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be intense like always.
I know that the guys from the West have to look at this game and go, okay, this could easily be who we have to match up against in a Conference USA championship game. So you've got to think for the West Division, this is one that all eyes are on. And then you look further down the season, and maybe if Florida Atlantic is playing well like they have been the past few years, you go, okay, let me also pay attention to Western and Florida Atlantic. Let me also pay attention to Marshall and Florida Atlantic, because it could easily be one of these three teams. But I think this game, the guys on Red Towel Radio were talking about it. And the big question that went through the whole duration of that episode, not even when I was on during the segment, was, has this rivalry supplanted Middle Tennessee as Western's primary rivalry? And I have to say yes for a couple of reasons. And it's well documented. I've said it a number of we're spanning multiple sports here. We're playing for championships or competing for championships at that level in multiple sports. And we were built to exploit the social media age. So it became easier to create some excitement. It became easier to create involvement and interaction. So, yeah, I think for the younger generation of student especially, it's supplanted Middle Tennessee State, because for a lot of the time those kids are on campus, Middle Tennessee's been bad, so there's not much rivalry aspect. Now, again, I completely respect the historic significance of 100 Miles of Hate, and I'll never downplay it, because I think it's important. Anytime you can keep playing the same team for over a century and have 70-some matchups or whatever it is, that is outstanding. So the question is still out there, and I'm sure you saw the poll that Red Towel Radio put up yesterday asking that same question. Who do you think is the better rivalry now? Well, I'd like to point out that I did see that, and I did not retweet or like that post, because I wanted to see how it would play out without any Marshall fans skewing the results from me doing that. And we still won with 69% of the vote.
Nice.
So, yeah, we're doing something right. The Herd and the Toppers, when they lock up, are doing something right. So let's talk about this daggone game. I'm going to run down some general stats, and Stephen, we're going to move into the Western Kentucky offense, and we're going to talk about some of those players first. Let's talk about general stats for these teams: points per game, points allowed, yards, and then we'll break it down by what they're gaining. So points per game, Western Kentucky's only scoring about 22 points per game. The Herd is at 38. Points allowed, 27.3 for the Toppers, and Marshall's just a field goal, 3.5 points per game. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't think Western will find the end zone. Actually, I think they will. Yardage per game on offense, yards per game for the Tops, total yards 288 per game, Marshall 503. And then pass yards, rush yards broken down, 166 for the Tops, 122 on the ground for the Tops, pass yards 254 for Marshall and 249 on the ground. Very, very balanced offense for Marshall. I mean, you might as well call it a balanced offense for the Tops as well. I mean, plus 40 in pass yards isn't that much. A couple of chunk plays, and it's the same stuff. So let's talk about some of those players on this Western Kentucky offense, and then we'll get some insight from Steven about what we think is going to happen here. So starting off with the quarterback, number 1, Terrell Pigram, Piggy T, the 5'10" question mark that Steven seems to think, 210-pound senior, 49 out of 84 on the season, 498 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Excellent touchdown to interception ratio. He has been sacked 7 times, another 47 carries for 197 yards, 4.2 yards per carry, no touchdowns. Piggy T is leading the team in pass yards and rush yards so far this season. But you've got to feature some running backs because 2 guys in particular turned it on against Middle Tennessee. But, of course, when you've got the second leading rusher from 2019 on your team, he's got to be featured as well. It's just a matter of time before Gage Walker breaks out. So, number 5, running back Gage Walker, the 6'1", 195-pound senior, 25 carries, 68 yards, 1 touchdown, only good for 2.7 yards per carry. You got to think he's going to get out of that funk sooner or later. We're going to feature Jakari Moses, and I know there's a couple of other backs you'll probably be talking about here when we get some synopsis from you. Number 3, Jakari Moses, the 5'9", 195-pound junior, really had a great game. Like to see that from him against Middle Tennessee State. 6 carries, 44 yards on the season. Trio of receivers / tight ends that we got to talk about. Leading receiver still on the season is number 4, Mitchell Tinsley, the 6'1", 185-pound junior. 11 receptions, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns, good for 10.6 yards per catch. And then bursting on the scene finally against Middle Tennessee State. We hope it continues. Number 9, Xavier Lane, 6'4", 200-pounder. He's a senior, 9 catches, 78 yards, 1 touchdown, good for 8.7 yards per clip. And number 6, stellar tight end Joshua Simon, the 6'5", 235-pound true sophomore, 6 catches, 52 yards, and a touchdown, also good for 8.7 yards per carry. Look, we know there are a ton of other weapons that we can talk about. You can feel free to talk about them. But basically, here's what I got to ask you. We've got a 3-game sample of Western Kentucky and what their offense can and can't do or seems to be doing better than other things. So what do you think the game plan is going to be? Maybe, I mean, we know there's going to be a lot of rain in the forecast. So, what do you think the game plan is going to be for these Tops based on what we've seen?
I think Piggy T is going to be crucial in this game. I think he's got to be slippery to a point. I think he has to use his athleticism and his burst of speed that he has, because I think there's going to be times where the defense is in good position and shuts plays down, and he has to extend those with his legs. Now, a few times now this season when he's done that, he's had the ball pop out. Luckily, he's gotten on it a couple times, or other players have gotten on it, but ball security is going to be a must. Those guys are going to be punching for the ball. It's going to be wet as it is. So we definitely have to be secure with the ball when he's running it. We all saw that when Jakari Moses got in the game. When we talked about it with Coco, we talked about leaning on the run game to open up the offense, and that literally happened. When the run game started to progress, the field started to open up for the receivers. Like you said, Xavier Lane had a good game. Simon had a great game. Dayton Wade had some catches. Simon had some catches. The ball was getting spread around very nicely once we weren't a one-faceted offense. So I think that's just crucial that it has to continue. Whoever the running back is, it's already been documented that Helton's going to ride the hot hand. Whoever that is, if it's Moses, if it's Gage, if it's Malik Staples, whoever that is, we're going to ride the hot hand in the game. And it's nice that Xavier Lane finally stepped up. He's a big body. Craig Burks being, said that he's going to play in the game, whether it's a full go or not. That's 2 big bodies lining up on the outside that can stretch the field and make plays. if the weather and game scenario allows. And then Dayton Wade, Josh Simon over the middle. I mean, we've got plenty in the cupboard, but I think it's mainly going to be a ground game. And I'd like to see Tyrell Pigram be kind of a focal point of that. I really like his athleticism. I'd rather it be design runs than just plays breaking down and him taking off. But I think as long as he's making smart plays and not turning the ball over, which he hasn't interception-wise, I think that's going to be the biggest key, is not giving the ball back to Marshall, in a short field scenario. We just have to be smart, make good plays, and not give the ball back.
Well, we're going to talk about some of these key players here in a minute for this Marshall defense. But if folks have been listening to our episodes at all, not just this season, but a lot last season, they're going to know the usual suspects for this Marshall defense. So I got to ask you also, do you think there are some advantages or some mismatches that Western Kentucky can take place or can take advantage of in certain position groups? Do you think there is a, where's the weak? I guess what I got to say is, where's the weak link you think they have to attack this Herd defense?
I mean, they obviously have a good front and good linebacker core. Devontae Beckett's a great player. There's some players in the secondary that if we're stretching the field that can make plays. I think anytime you have two guys lining up on the outside that are both 6'3", 6'4", and Craig Burt and Xavier Lane, and then you have Josh Simon at 6'5". If those guys are roaming over the middle, running slant plays, quick outs, whatever it may be, weather allowing, it's hard to guard those type of players. And then when you have a guy that's as athletic as Piggy T is, when he takes off running, he's gone. And it's going to be wet, and it might be hard to grab him. And, he's 5'6", 5'7" on a good day if he's wearing heels. So he might duck behind the line and be gone through a gap, and he could be gone halfway down the field before you realize it. So, there's some good opportunity for mismatches. And it's really going to come down to kind of the game flow and the positions that we put ourselves in. We can't have penalties and get behind the sticks. And just making smart plays, just not running, first down and trying to run up the middle, and you end up with a 2nd and 10 and then you're forced to throw, and kind of just getting behind the sticks and the game flow with penalties, etc. So I definitely think, athleticism and just the size of some of the players we have, if the scenarios allow as the game plays out, that we can let those playmakers just make plays. I mean, that's what it boils down to. You want your playmakers to make plays, and you have to put them in position to be successful.
So let me ask you one more question that popped into my head, and we're going to do this for every segment that we cover, but unfortunately you're going to get put on the spot. Just a minute. Give me a player that nobody's talking about that you think could be a huge factor in this game from the Western Kentucky offense.
I think Malik Staples. I think hopefully we're banging on the goal line. Helton has shown that when we get to those short and goal situations, he likes to put Staples in, similar to DeAndre Furby in years past. He's a big, bruising, former ACC linebacker. He's a big body. He's hard to take down. If you meet him in the hole, I will like Malik Staples' chances to gain that extra yard that he needs. So I'm not sure they had a carry against MTSU, even though he was in the game. But if we're knocking on the doorstep, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets put in there to get those last hard couple yards and hopefully score a touchdown.
Yeah, would that be something if a guy like Malik Staples has like 3 carries for 2 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. All right, now let's talk about this Marshall defense, Trace. I mean, this is what the Herd's been hanging its hat on for all of the accolades and all of the love that everybody's showing to Grant Wells. Let's be honest. It's the defense that's the MVP of this team right now, without a doubt. If they're not playing as lights out as they're playing, chances are that Grant Wells isn't given the opportunities that he's had, whether that be with field position, whether that be with whatever, like a lead. I mean, anything. So let's talk about it. Let's get the usual suspects. Of course, we're going to feature a handful of guys. And just like I asked with Steven, or told Steven, you're probably going to talk about a lot more people. And that's great. That's what we want to hear. But it leads the Marshall defense is led by the tackling machine. You got to be, I guess, in this shortened sample of a season, odds-on favorite, right now, current front runner for maybe Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, and that's got to be linebacker number 4, Devontae Beckett, 5'10", 214-pound senior, 24 tackles on the season, 9 of those solo, only a half a sack and 1 forced fumble. Number 2, defensive end Darius Hodge, 6'2", 245-pound junior, 5 tackles, 2 of those solo. He is leading the herd with 2.5 sacks. Number 3, cornerback Stephen Gilmore, 5'11", 175-pound junior, 9 total tackles on the season, 6 of those solo, 1 interception, and 2 passes defended. Had probably, we talked about it, the best evolution of a game against Appalachian State. He was absolutely getting picked on, and by the end of the game, he was utterly dominating. And then a pair of safeties that we're going to feature for the herd. Number 1, safety Derek Pitts, 6 foot, 187-pound junior, 12 tackles, 6 of those solo, 1 pass defended. And number 13, safety Najee Johnson, Moonshine Throwdown hero from yesteryear, the 2017 game when he was a freshman, got that pick 6 on Mike White. The 5'10", 200-pound senior now, 12 tackles of his own, 4 of those solo, and he does have an interception. So, Trace, I talked about it with Moff. We know what he thinks the Western Kentucky offense is going to do. What does this Marshall defense do to counter what the Hilltoppers are hoping to do on offense?
Well, it'd be easy to say the same thing that they've been doing the last 2 games, but I mean it's got to be a lot of that. I mean, it has to be, even though you're not going to give up 7 points and 0 points every week. It's not going to happen. I mean, eventually they're going to start giving up some more points, and it'll probably be in this game to an extent. But like, you just have to keep playing at least in the ballpark of what they've been doing. I mean, we know what we're going to get from Devontae Beckett. I mean, we're going to get probably 10, 15 tackles because that's just what he does. It's just his second nature to him. It's easy. It's almost easy for him to get that many tackles. We know we're going to get there. Defensive line, I mean, they're a really solid unit so far. We know we're going to get some guys with some pressure. Darius Hodge, Cumberlander, all those guys are going to try to get the Pigram and try to get him down. And like you said, Western's given up to, 7 sacks so far. So, I mean, that could lend itself to good things for Marshall's defense, because Marshall has been pretty swarming at the quarterback the first 2 games of the year. So that could be big. I mean, linebackers, I have no issues there with them. Secondary, I mean, yeah, like you said, Gilmore got picked on heavily in that first half against Appalachian State, but man, he turned it on like crazy compared to how he started. Like we said, just from what, in the midst of one game, I don't know if I've seen a player go from so bad to so good in the middle of the same game. I mean, it was crazy to see how that evolved, and hopefully now that's going to make him even more confident moving forward. Hopefully he'll turn into, maybe a number 1 type cornerback. Who knows? I mean, I think he's got the potential. So hopefully the secondary can build on what they did in that second half against App State, because they really shut them down second half. So hopefully that can be the case. I mean, if Marshall's defense, put it this way, if they play anywhere near what they played the first 2 games, I like Marshall a lot in this game. But, I mean, we have seen them on the road in the rain before, Charlotte, look like crap. So you just, you can't ignore that. I mean, it's not just them, but like Marshall on the road in the rain, it always makes you a little weary. So, but I mean, I'm confident in the defense. I mean, I'm more concerned with the offense just because of the potential elements, but I'm pretty confident in the defense to go out there and do enough for them to win the game.
Well, it took 32 minutes and 30 seconds for Trace to bring up the Charlotte game from last year, but he brought it up and I knew it was going to happen because it's a rainy away game, and that recipe absolutely kept Marshall from playing for a Conference USA title last year. They were in the driver's seat until they lost that game, but both teams got to play in the rain, unfortunately. And maybe unless there's no rain, but you got to like what Marshall's doing. And you're right. If it's not broke, you don't fix it. Right. And it's definitely not broken right now. It couldn't be working any better. And Marshall could have a down game versus what we've seen and still be a pretty darn good defense. The question is, how are they going to be able to counteract what undoubtedly Tyson Helton and Brian Ellis are going to be able to come up with? Because I don't think that EKU's coaching staff is anywhere near that talented at play calling and drawing up an offense. Sean Clark and his crew might be there. I mean, they win a lot of ball games down in Boone, so let's not sell them short. So, it's going to come down to execution probably, and in a nasty, windy, wet game, it's always got to favor the defense. It just has to. I would think it does. So anyway, where are the advantages for this Herd defense over the Toppers offense? Where do they attack? Where can they, slow what they want to do? Just like I asked Steven, what do you think Marshall where do they have the edge the biggest over the Tops?
Well, I think just based on the first two games of the year, especially the App State game, I think Marshall has a clear advantage in run defense. That's been straight up dominant this year. I mean, to see what they did against Appalachian State and the fact that they ran for over 300 yards on Charlotte and then ran for over 400 yards against the team they just played. I mean, literally 700 plus yards in 2 games. Marshall gave up 96 yards rushing to them. I mean, Marshall's run defense is no joke. And I think that's a big reason, obviously. Clearly, that's a massive reason that they won that game in the first place because they took away the run, which Appalachian State prided itself on. I've seen some graphic that said they've been like the 4th best O-line in the country so far this year. Marshall just took them out. Like, it wasn't even – 96 yards of rushing, 2.9 yards a carry as a team. I mean, and that right there did not allow App State to get the passing game going. So, like, they took away the run, and Marshall had again in this game. I mean, even now, maybe not completely shut them down, but we know Gage Walker's a very good running back, and Western's got a pretty good line, it seems like. But, I mean, Marshall's D-line and their front seven's stout. So, if they can take away the run, that'll put a lot of pressure on Western Kentucky to pass the ball. And, it kind of make them one-dimensional. So I think Marshall's got the advantage there, especially looking what they did to a very talented running game that Appalachian State presents.
Well, look, this will be Marshall's first crack having to face a true dual-threat quarterback. App State's quarterback was a drop-back passer. Eastern Kentucky's quarterback just really didn't – he's a drop-back passer as well, and he just didn't have a prayer. They were just outmatched on the line. So it's going to be – a different animal for the Herd defense this week. They're going to have to play sound assignment football and contain Pigram because, like I said, he's leading the team in passing and rushing. So if one of these backs gets hot and he gets hot, look out in a nasty game. All right, Steve, we're going to flip the coin now, and we got to talk Western Kentucky defense. So here we go. A lot of guys, a lot of playmakers. They seem to get it right a little bit against against Middle Tennessee. Like we said when Coco was on the show, I thought that we would see much fewer yardage allowed to Middle Tennessee than we did against Louisville and Liberty, and we saw just that. So these guys are starting to get it right. Conference play no doubt helped. So let's talk about some of these star defenders for the Hilltoppers. Leading tackler on the year, I thought we would, I knew he wouldn't be the leading tackler, but, man, if you got an All-American, you figure you're going to start with the defensive end. But, no, we're going to start with number 31, safety Antoine Kincaid. Been playing absolutely lights out all season long. 5'11", 195-pound senior, 25 tackles on the year, 14 of those solo, and a pass defended. Number 36, linebacker Kyle Bailey, 6', 225-pound senior, also 25 tackles, 13 of those solo. My guy that's been around forever, number 2, safety, Dev Key, 6'1", 210-pound senior, 23 tackles, 13 solo, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. What can you not like about Dev Key? And number 10, finally, 4th guy on the list, the All-American, number 10, defensive end, D'Angelo, the freaking freak Malone, 6'4", 230 pounds, chiseled out of granite, senior, 22 tackles from a defensive end spot, 11 of those solo, 2 sacks, and 1 forced fumble through 3 games. And number 50, we're going to get a defensive line, a little defensive lineman love this week. Number 50, defensive tackle Ricky Barber, 6'3", 295-pound freshman, 14 tackles, 6 solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. You got to feature a defensive lineman when you're talking about Marshall and their dangerous run game. So, Steve, as with the pattern in this episode, what in the world is this Western Kentucky defense going to do to slow Marshall based on what we know about the Herd?
Yeah, they've got to create pressure. Especially in this game, there's going to be a lot of running the ball, but they're going to try to set up some run plays with some quick out screen plays. Throws over the middle. So I think those big guys up front have to, hold their, fill the gaps let D'Angelo hopefully get to the quarterback. Kyle Bailey, the tackling machine, is going to be there. Eli Brown, tackling machine, laying wood. Devin Kee's going to be coming down. Kincaid's going to be coming down. Those guys were headhunting against Middle Tennessee. We're just going to say those guys were coming down and hitting people. Devin Key had another interception against Middle Tennessee that was overturned on a review, but dude's making plays. He just, we know what to expect when he's on the field. He's everywhere. He's seeking out the ball. But I think the main thing is just getting pressure on the quarterback, staying in the backfield, and just filling those gaps. I mean, earlier in the season, we were caught out of position a lot, giving up big plays. I don't think that's going to be an issue with the weather that we're staring at in 2 days from now. So, if that holds, it's going to be a ground and pound game. And I like the guys that we have that are going to be swarming to the ball. So get pressure, get in the backfield, and keep Marshall behind the sticks. You have to do that.
Yeah, let the cat out of the bag a little bit. Where are the advantages over this Herd offense? I think we know two right off the bat. Not two advantages, but two guys, one position. But where do you think the real advantages for this Topper defense lay over the Herd offense?
I don't want to call it an advantage because I guess just in my position and trying to be a realist, I am very aware and versed in the fact that Marshall has a very good offensive line. I don't think getting pressure on the quarterback is going to be a given no matter, what kind of All-American player we have. But I trust with Malone on one end, Juwan Jones on the other end, and then when you got Eli Brown and Kyle Bailey filling the gaps, I just really like our unit as far as an experienced team that, you saw it last year against Army, that when we know we're facing a ground attack and we know that's what we're going to get, those guys swarmed to the ball, and we really just out-armied Army last year. I think that's kind of what's going to boil down to is we have to control the flow of our offense and slow Marshall down, stop the run, swarm to the ball, make good tackles. We can't miss tackles. We can't, just let a guy – we can't try to arm tackle. You've got to wrap up, let 2-3 guys get there and bring them down. And we've got plenty of guys that can come down and make those tackles and those big hits. So I don't want to say it's a true advantage, but we have plenty of guys that can make those plays one-on-one if it comes down to it.
Well, look, if there is an advantage, if this defense does have an advantage somewhere over the Marshall offense, it has to be at defensive end because, in my opinion, Juwan Jones and D'Angelo Malone are the finest bookends in the conference. And we've been saying for months that the game within the game for this particular matchup was going to be the Marshall offensive line against the Western defensive line and vice versa. And the winner of those games within the games will probably go on to win the ultimate game, the Moonshine Throwdown. Now, throw in weather as a wild card in that, and that becomes an even more important game within the game. But look, there's so much playmaking ability, and it's comforting to know that they've gotten it right a little bit. They needed to come back down to earth and realize, hey, man, we just need to go out there and have fun, like Coco Darden was saying. And I think they did that a little bit more, and we saw that against Middle Tennessee. It was a game they really wanted to win. They really wanted to prove something, and they were having fun, and they ultimately came out on top. Now, are we going to see more of that this week, or will the pressure be back on like, all right, we're back at home. It's homecoming. Marshall's coming in. It's a big game. We know we got to get past them in order to be, prove we're contenders in the East this year. Will all that creep back in, or is it going to be more of the, man, let's go out there and play our game and see what happens type mentality? I don't know, but I tend to think the looser and more fun you feel, the better you're going to play. Trace, it's Marshall offense time. Now we've learned about the Toppers offense. We've learned about the Toppers defense, the Marshall defense. Steven just versed you on a lot of guys across the defense. Some you already knew about, and others you've heard the name before. But now let's talk about what Marshall's going to do. And we're going to feature some guys, the usual suspects for the Herd. And a lot of fans are already well aware of what Marshall will most likely try to do, and probably try to do it until it is no longer fun to watch. But historically, we know what type of game Doc Holliday likes to play. and a rainy, nasty game potentially, that just plays right into his hand. He loves to run the ball, and run the ball. So that's probably what we're going to see until we don't want to see it anymore. But if it's working, he ain't going to go away from it. So let's talk about some of these guys. Number 8, quarterback, redshirt freshman Grant Wells, 6'2", 210-pounder, 27 out of 48 on the season, 470 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and he's only been sacked twice. 12 carries on the year, 73 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. A couple of running backs we're going to talk about. Number 20, of course, reigning Conference USA MVP, leading rusher in the conference of 2019, 6', 223-pound junior, Brendan Knox, Fort Knox, a term that is so just fitting. It's just so fitting. And even more fitting being that it's just up the road from Bowling Green, Kentucky. As a matter of fact, if you come down to the game, Trace, you should drive right past Fort Knox. But anyway, 46 carries on the year, 223 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, good for 4.8 yards per carry. And number 5, Sheldon Evans, if I'm not mistaken, a team captain again this week. Amazing the amount of respect that they have for this guy. I mean, not to take anything away from him, but he's a second string running back, and he is a true leader on this Marshall team. 5'11", 200-pound junior, 18 carries for 65 yards, 1 touchdown, good for 3.6 yards per carry this year. And of course, Mr. Versatility, number 11, tight end Xavier Gaines, 6'3", 220-pound senior, 5 catches, 117 yards, 1 touchdown, 23.4 yards per catch, Trace. Of course, we know what Xavier Gaines brings in the run game, and if they want to feel froggy, he can throw a pass back there. Couple of wide receivers we're going to feature. Number 13, Brock Thompson, 6'2", 188-pound sophomore, 8 catches, 104 yards, 13 yards per reception. And number 9, wide receiver Talik Keaton, 6'1", 188-pound sophomore, 3 catches, 69 yards, 1 touchdown. Also good for 23 yards per reception and pulls double duty as Marshall's punt returner. So, Trace, let's talk about what you think this Marshall offense is going to do and where their advantages lie over what Western Kentucky puts on the field on defense. So what do you got for me?
Well, there's no secret that they're going to try to establish the run. I think that goes without saying. And why wouldn't you? You have the best running back in Conference USA, although he would only be 4th string some places, but he's 1st string here, Brendan Knox.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame he doesn't play in Boca Raton. He would never see the field.
No, but at least he's seen the field here. The guy's just so hard to stop. I mean, it's even if he was playing with an average offensive line, I still think he'd have numbers. But the fact that he's playing with a flat out potentially dominant offensive line, he's going to have some insane numbers. I mean, last year the O-line was really good. That's why he was able to lead the league in rushing like he did. But now I think this O-line is even better than last year's. I think this O-line has a couple potential NFL draft picks on it. And it's just they just move bodies. I mean, that's what they do. They just move bodies. They open up those running lanes. Knox is just running tough. I mean, the guy to be a relatively small guy. I mean, he's a pretty well-built guy, but to be relatively small, he runs so tough, so hard in between the tackles. He rarely goes down on the first try. He's a complete running back. He's good in pass blocking, protection for the quarterbacks. They don't throw to him a lot out of the backfield, but he has shown that he's capable of doing that. I mean, just a completely versatile, very good player, great player from top to bottom. So there's no doubt they're going to try to establish the run, and they should, especially if the conditions are bad. You're not going to want Wells to go out there and sling it like he's Byron Leftwich in the GMAC Bowl or anything. I mean, it's going to be bad conditions, so you don't want that. Of course, if he could get going through the air, sure. But, I mean, I think they have to get the run going. I mean, and Sheldon Evans, talking about him a little bit more, I said this on the preview episode for the running backs. I think he would be a starting running back at a lot of places, especially in Conference USA. But because he's behind Brendan Knox, he's the number 2 guy. But he's a very good player, very well respected, as it shows every week when he's a captain, basically every game so far this year. I think it might be every game so far this year.
Maybe.
And I think if it wasn't for Knox, he would probably be putting up 1,000-yard seasons himself. So, I mean, I just think he's a very good player. But, I mean, there's no denying that they're going to try to establish the run before anything else. And if they can get the run going 200 yards, 250, whatever, maybe more, hopefully, then they're in good shape, especially, given the weather conditions that might not be the best for passing. So definitely going to try to get the run going.
Yeah, well, for sure. And here's another thing that we need to talk about when you talk about this Marshall run game. It's not necessarily put it in the gut of a running back, right? Because we've seen them do an end around to almost said Randy Johnson, the big unit. Yeah.
Unit.
Willie Johnson, 6'10", doing an end around. No, it'd be Willie Johnson. We've seen that on end arounds, and it's worked many, many times. And we've seen Xavier Gaines line up in a Wildcat and bust long run plays and things like that. So it's not necessarily just snap it and put it in the gut of a running back. Marshall runs the ball a myriad of ways, and Tim Cramsey does a great job of being creative when it comes to running plays. So
Grant Wells too.
And yeah, on a zone read, we saw them fake out every Appalachian State Mountaineer for that touchdown. I mean, there was no one near him, and he could have crawled into the end zone. But the bottom line is, it's going to come down to offensive line versus defensive line. That is it. To me, that is it. If it's just not a super sloppy game full of turnovers to where it doesn't matter what we think's going to go down, turnovers keep screwing it all up, it's going to boil down to offensive line and defensive line. So look, where are the advantages, the real advantages for Marshall over this Toppers defense? Where is the strength? Where do they attack? What is it specifically?
Well, it's tough to say that the decided advantage is the O-line over the D-line, especially given that talking about how good Western's D-line is and two really, really good players on it. But I think that's the advantage for Marshall. I mean, I think every team on the schedule, Marshall's O-line is the advantage over over that other team's D-line. I mean, that's until I see otherwise. I think that's the advantage. I mean, yeah, Grant Wells slinging it around to all those receivers looked really good against Eastern Kentucky, and he had some flashes against App State as well. But you still aren't entirely sure if that's going to continue the way that we would like to see it. I mean, we feel pretty daggone confident in the running game and the O-line coupled together. So that's why that's always what they try to do, is establish that, and it works more times than not. I mean, so I think no matter who it's against, I'm riding with that offensive line of Marshall. That's what they were talking about on the CBS broadcast of the App State game. They were saying it's not the biggest line. It's not an SEC size line. I'm just thinking, okay, these guys are like 310 pounds each, 315. Really, who the heck cares if they're not okay, they can be, they're huge as it is, but then they're also faster and more athletic than a lot of those other offensive lines. So you get the best of both worlds in a lot of ways there to be quote unquote undersized, which I think is a bunch of crap, honestly. There's nothing undersized about those guys to me, but whatever. That's just another story for another day.
When you line a guy up that's 6'9", 350 pounds or whatever Josh Ball is, that's pretty big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've got guys like Kane Madden who just continue their rise and trajectory and positive play and accolades and getting more and more pub. You just run behind those guys. Alex Millette, Will Ulmer. I mean, come on. Marshall does have a good offensive line, and it's not a wild statement to say that the advantage is offensive line over the top or D line when they're both just really, really good and someone just happens to be a little bit better. So look, we've talked about all the usual suspects. We talk about what we think is going to happen. We talk about what we expect to see. So here it is. This is where the rubber meets the road. Steven, come back in here. Tell me what these Toppers have to do to absolutely go out and get a win in the 2020 homecoming edition of the Moonshine Throwdown in BGKY this Saturday.
KD, they've got to score more points.
Oh,
yes,
Sonny Randall. Did you know Sonny Randall, the late great Sonny Randall? In order to get this win, you're going to have to score more than your opponent. Love that one.
No, we alluded to it earlier. I mean, they really, really, really have to play clean football. They haven't had a lot of penalties, but when they have, they've really been kind of momentum drive killers that have put them behind the sticks and forced them into situations where you're looking at second long, third longs that you just don't want to be in, especially if the conditions hold to what we're looking at. clean football, not a lot of penalties, turnovers need to be kept to a minimum or zero. I mean, it's going to sound cliche, but, drives need to sustain. You've got to move the ball down the field. If we get beyond the 50, even though it's going to be windy, we got Legatron back there kicking field goals. So, dude, I'm pretty happy with him. I'm going to keep singing his praises until he misses one. He hasn't done it yet. But if we get within 50 yards, I like his odds of banging it through, no matter how much wind there is. So, and then, defensively, we've got to get off the field on third downs. I mean, that's kind of been our Achilles heel. Even MTSU was able with Asher and with the receiver, Jaron Pierce, I think it was his name. They kind of focused in on that one connection. We're able to extend some drives that we should have been able to get off the field. So, in this game, it's going to be all about just tackling, just clean tackling on the defensive side, just not letting guys slip through your hands, missing tackles, being out of position. So getting off the field on third down, keeping drives going on offense, and just not shooting yourself in the foot with penalties and turnovers. I mean, all that may sound cliche, but in this rivalry game where every point is going to be at a premium and it may come down to the last possession and who has ball last, you really have to just be paying very much attention to those fine details that are going to show up on the final score.
Look, we've seen that plenty of times. Last year, the team that had the ball last won the game. The year before that, the team that had the ball last could have won. They were on the 10-yard line with under a minute to go before Ryan B makes an unbelievable strip sack to secure a win for Marshall. This is going to go down to the last second. I can't envision a scenario where Marshall wins by 40 or Western wins by 40 without just a ton of turnovers occurring or defensive scores or special team scores or all that kind of stuff. But look, to me, number one, you're going to have to outplay the Marshall offensive line. And that's a really tough task right off the bat. It seems like we've been doing nothing but talking about Marshall offensive line all day long, all episode long. But it's a point of emphasis for a reason, because it's the number one thing you have to do to win the games, outplay that Herd O line. Number two, to me, they're going to have to control the clock. You said it before in the preview for Middle Tennessee, the best weapon, the best way to keep, I think it was O'Hara, off the field was to hold on to the ball. Well, it's the same thing. The best way to keep Brendan Knox from gaining yards on you is to keep him standing on the sideline. So move your own chains, keep control of the ball, and keep him standing over there watching. Number three, I think at some point, maybe multiple points in this game, Tyson and Helton is going to have to dig down and take a calculated risk. Now, whatever that means, if it means he's going to have to set something up that they're going to try to run later in the game, whatever the case may be, I think they're going to have to try to take a calculated risk or two to extend a lead, to build a little bit of a cushion, or to maybe come back and take a lead when Marshall's got some momentum going. Number four, here's one we really haven't talked about at all today, which is amazing considering, A, we usually do this every week, and B, we've been talking about the weather a ton too. John Haggerty must be basically perfect. When you said points might be at a premium, dude, yards might be at a premium. So if you're flipping the field, it can keep Marshall on a long field because John Haggerty keeps putting out bombs in 26-mile-an-hour winds or whatever and can pin them deep. You can't tell me that that's not a huge asset. But on the flip side of that, we saw him have a couple of rough kicks against Liberty. He had a rough kick against Middle Tennessee State. So the tendency here the past couple of games has been to have to work away from that. So if he can come out and be perfect, that's what you're going to have. And number five, the fifth bonus point for the Moonshine Throwdown, play 60 solid minutes of football. We saw the Toppers kill themselves by letting Liberty jump out to a 10-point early lead, and they couldn't ultimately scratch all the way back. They outscored Liberty for the final 3 quarters of that game. But the slow start, the taking the first part of the first quarter off is what did them in. So in order to get a win in a homecoming home game, rivalry game, all of it is stacked up. You want to get the front-running lead in the Conference USA East, prove you're a title contender this year, you're going to have this game. And those things are what it's going to take to secure that victory. Steven has laid out his points to victory for the Tops. I gave you mine. Trace, now what do you got for the Herd? What are they absolutely going to have to do to get a win in the 2020 Moonshine Throwdown? We know what's at stake. We know what the weather might look like and all that good stuff. What do you think they got to do to get a win?
First thing I wrote down, which I said this early on in this podcast about talking about the long layoff that they've had, I put the first thing I wrote down is don't play rusty. And I think that is absolutely a possibility. And like it could end up being a detriment to the team if they play like they could play, given the fact that they haven't played in 3 weeks, given the fact that it's on the road. They don't. It's a rivalry game. I mean, there's a lot that could go wrong with the rust situation. And like I know Doc said it, like that they don't like the fact that they've had to wait that long to play. I mean, who would? I mean, you get out of your rhythm. You just be a top 25 team, and then you got to wait almost a month to play again. I mean, that's tough. So if they can avoid the rust and just come out and play sharp enough from the start, instead of getting down, playing bad for 2 quarters and then starting to play better, if they can just avoid that, then I think they're in very good shape. So that's the first thing I wrote down. Second thing I wrote down is beat them up. And I'm talking about the trenches. I'm talking about O-line versus D-line. I'm talking about Marshall's D-line versus Western's O-line. I want to see Marshall win the trenches. I have extreme confidence in Marshall's O-line. I think everybody should. I think it's the top part of the team. I think it's their biggest strength. So, I mean, I think that they're going to be tough to handle. And, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we know how Western's got a very good D-line and 2 extremely talented players on it, but I just think that Marshall O-line's tough. And, I mean, Marshall's D-line's tough. I mean, they're good at grabbing sacks and all that, so it's going to be tough. So I want to see them beat them up. I want to see them beat them up. Next point is I wrote down sound special teams. Especially if the rains like they say it could be, I think sound special teams would be big in this one, because we've seen in certain other rain games where Marshall has issues in the special teams department, and we can't see that again, because if they do that, that could single-handedly lead to numerous turnovers. I mean, potentially. So if they can play sound special teams from top to bottom, I'm not going to put a certain number on what has to happen or whatever. I just need to see some sound overall special teams play, trying to not turn the ball over a bunch, no muffed kicks, no this, no that. Then I like their chances there as well. Then my last point is, this is more defensive side of things. I would like to see 3+ sacks defensively. I think that's doable. I mean, you said Western, we're talking about how they've given up quite a few sacks so far this year. Marshall's been good has been good in that department in the past, and they've been good, pretty good this year. Darius Hodge is no joke there. The front 7, I mean, they're good at getting to the quarterback. So I'd like to say, I mean, even though Pigram's going to be pretty elusive, obviously, I'd like to still see 3+ sacks defensively. I think that's attainable. I think that would be a big key to potentially Marshall having a lot of success on defense. So 3+ sacks. That's what's the number I'm looking for there.
Well, look, for the Herd to get a win in this game for me, I wrote down number 1. It's going to be running back by committee. Everybody's kind of worried about Brendan Knox, but you don't have to give the dude 30 carries like everybody thinks that he has to have, because Sheldon Evans is very capable.
Yep.
Knowledge McDaniel is still the second leading rusher on the team after his 93-yard effort against Eastern Kentucky. Xavier Gaines can rack you up rushing yards. Willie Johnson can get you rushing yards. So, and Grant Wells can move the chains from time to time. It doesn't always have to be Brendan Knox. No, I'm not saying it isn't going to be. And usually when you hear the term running back by committee, it's because you need several backs to get the job done. Marshall doesn't necessarily need several backs to get the job done. I just think they're afforded that luxury. They have that many capable backs that nobody has to get overworked. And if somebody's not having a great day, they can try somebody else out and see if they can, get a spark. Number 2, of course, I mean, hey, plain and simple, no turnovers, no extra chances for Western Kentucky. Just do you, man. Hold on to the ball and try to extend some drives. Number 3, on defense, I think you got to set the edges and play contained against Piggy T. Don't let him get outside and use that speed and, get an extra 4 or 5 yards on a broken play or move the chain or bust one big. That's going to be really important. The Western Kentucky offensive line is no slouch. There are a lot of guys that have a ton of talent. So it's not like Western is going to just stand there and let Marshall just rush free at the quarterback. These guys are going to have a hard time getting to Piggy T. So to just think that it's going to be easy for Darius Hodge and guys and Cumberlander and guys like that to just bust through and get to Piggy T is you're fooling yourself if you think that's going to happen. The Topper offensive line is getting better each week, and we really saw them take a stride, which led to a lot more offensive success against Middle Tennessee. Now, granted, Middle Tennessee's defense is nowhere on par with Marshall's defense, but still, that does not take away from how quality of a unit the Hilltopper offensive line is. Number 4 on offense for Marshall, again, you've got to exploit the talents of Xavier Gaines. You've got to use him to particularly create mismatches. Even if you're going to use him as a decoy and put him on, get him on someone particular so they can't guard, let's say, Willie Johnson or Talik Keaton or Jaron Woodyard or whatever. You're trying to open up an area of the field. The guy is just too talented and a mismatch at too many positions to not exploit fully, especially in a rivalry game. Number 5, look, continue to be you. The Herd doesn't have to reinvent the wheel here. They don't have to try to be something they're not. Just play their game. Strong, sound defense and a run first, run second, and sometimes run third mentality. Take what the defense will give you through the air, or take what the defense and the weather will give you through the air. But don't try to be something you're not, because it's not broken. It's freaking working. Bottom line is it's going to come down to who makes the fewest mistakes and who can meet most of the points of victory that we've laid out. 200 proof player time, guys. Steve, let me get you back in here. Who is going to be your 200 proof player for the 2020 Moonshine Throwdown?
I'm going to go with Piggy T. I think we've seen some improved play from him against MTSU. I think the running game is going to be key here, and I think he's a big part of that. Even as quarterback, he's also their leading rusher. I think Jakari Moses and Gage Walker should have good games. But I think Piggy T is going to have to extend some drives and some plays with his legs, just given the elements and given that he's not a strong and lethal passer. I think his strength is running the ball, and that's what he's going to have to do. So give me Piggy T. Let's ride that horse.
I can't say I disagree with you. And if you're thinking Stephen brought his own theme music to these segments, I just got to tell you right off that we're also parents, as you might realize. So he's got Jet sitting on his lap there, and Jet's just banging away on some tablet. So if you get a little bit of extra, like, what's that weird noise? Hey, man, you just got to bear with us because we're dads first and fans second. You know what I mean? But for me, I'm also going Piggy T. He's my 200 proof player. I mean, look, the offenses seem to be built around him right now. It might not be later in the season, but right now, the leading passer, leading rusher, he's touching the ball on every snap. He's got to have a solid game. He's got to be the guy. I mean, period. If he stinks it up, Western has no chance. If he plays a great game, Western has more than a great chance. The success ultimately offensively is going to hinge on him. So I'm with Steven. Ride that horse until it bucks you. Trace, who's going to be your 200 proof player this week? Who's the guy that's going to lead the Herd to victory in the 2020 Moonshine Throwdown?
Oh, man. I got to roll with the average fourth string running back, Brendan Knox, man. I got to roll with him. I mean, got to go with him. I mean, the guy, he's a gamer. This is a big game. I expect big things from him. I think he'll deliver. I mean, even if he doesn't have like the 250-yard performance or whatever that he has had before, I still think he's going to have a very good game. Him coupled with the O-line is a very hard duo to prepare for. So I think Brendan Knox is going to have a great game. I don't know. I'm not going to put a certain number on it, but I expect big things from him like I do every week. I mean, that's just the caliber of player he is. He's the best player Marshall has by my account. Maybe the best player on the field altogether. I mean, that's very possible. So, I mean, great player. I expect big things from him. So, Brendan Knox, eat just feed him.
So when's the last time that we both agreed on both of our 200 proof players in an episode? But I agree with you. Brendan Knox is my guy as well. And you said a lot of what I was going to say. It's a big game, and he's a big-time player, and that is supposed to mean big-time plays. So if you want to prove once again that you're the premier runner in Conference USA, the best back that the conference has to offer, then this is the type of game you've got to go out and you've got to have that big stat line. You've got to go for $150, if you can, or maybe 200 bills. I mean, it was nice to do that against Florida Atlantic last year, and they needed it. They needed that effort to get that win. And remember, a lot of those yards didn't come till the fourth quarter, which if you're Western Kentucky, should absolutely terrify you because you think you have him in check for 3/4 of the game. It's an off night for Brendan Knox, and bam, he goes for 100 and some yards in the fourth quarter or something like that, And I just feel like he's poised to have a big game. It always seems like offensive line and offensive linemen love, like if this were on a natural grass field and this would turn into a muddy mess, it just seems like that's the type of game that dudes like that love. So the fact that we could see, just wet, slippery, nasty conditions, offensive linemen seem to love to be able to put their hat on a guy and just bulldoze them to the ground. Much rather play run defense than pass defense in conditions like that. And with talent of Brendan Knox and crew, could be a pretty big game for Fort Knox. Score prediction time, guys. Trace, since you're back in here leading the charge, what do you got for us for a score prediction in the 2-0 Moonshine Throwdown?
Yeah, the towel rack article that came out today pretty much spoiled it if anybody read that. But, I'll just go with, I think, ironically, this is the same score that I said 2 years ago, I think. But I'm going to say 27-17, Marshall. I think they'll cover. I mean, I think it's going to be a close game. I mean, I think whatever the spread is, I think Marshall covers it. I mean, they could, this is a game, though, that you have to be worried about, I feel like. I mean, on the road, big layoff, against a rival, that it's always a tough game against, weather. I mean, there's a lot of things in this game that make you weary, and rightfully so. I mean, Western's not exactly. I mean, they haven't been that great so far this year. So far, I mean, the Liberty game speaks for itself. Louisville, I mean, that's Louisville. I mean, they're a pretty good ACC team, and then they did beat Middle, but it was only by 3 points, and I don't think Middle's very good. So, I mean, we don't really know how good Western is yet. So this will be a indicating game for them to figure out where they are in the Conference USA East pecking order as well. And Marshall needs this game because, I mean, you don't want to start 0-1 in conference. So there's a lot at stake in this game. And, I mean, I think Marshall, I mean, this is a game, though, that we have seen them lose types of games like this a lot in the past, just last year. So Marshall does not play very well in the rain. Their last 3 games in the rain last year, UCF, FIU, and Charlotte, they were 1-2 in those games, and it took overtime to win one of them. So they haven't played very well in the rain. So, and that's not a good thing, especially when, everybody talks about Doc Holliday teams in certain games. Well, that's a certain game that Doc Holliday teams don't usually play well in. So I don't think it's going to be a clean, pretty played game from either side, honestly. But I think Marshall will do enough to win 27-17, maybe pull away late, maybe, I don't know, something like that. So I'm going to roll with that one. We'll see.
Okay, 27-17. Before I bring Steven in, I've got to point out a couple of things. I've said it way back at the beginning of the episode. Tracy's calling a 10-point win. During Marshall's 3-game win streak, they haven't won the game by more than 7 points. And in the last 2 victories, they've won by a total of 6 points. And to another point that you said, it's an away game, just kind of cavalierly threw that in there. It's not just an away game. It's the first away game for your starting quarterback. He's never gotten dressed in an opposing collegiate locker room yet as the starting quarterback. So it's a break in the pattern. It's all something new. And still, Marshall could cover relatively easily, but they could also get out and run into the big red buzzsaw on homecoming. So, Steve, come back in here. What have you got for a score prediction this year?
Yeah, I mean, just being a realist, haven't been overly convinced with the Topper offense yet, even though I think we did see a stride in the right direction. I I don't think this game is going to lend itself to that progression continuing, especially given the strength and weaknesses of both teams. I think I've got Marshall with a 24-17 victory.
Okay, Steve likes it a little bit tighter. He likes the Herd to barely not cover, 7.5-point favorites. 24-17, ruining homecoming. Look, I don't generally like to give a score prediction, but I feel really lost now because I'm not sure how this game's going to play out with the weather and who could have a hot day and who might cough the ball up a bunch of times. But look, Brendan Knox historically has been really good at holding on to the football. And he's also been really good at racking up yards after contact. And we've talked ad nauseum about how good Marshall's offensive line is. All of that lends me to have to pick Marshall this year. But I do like it in a tight one. I don't like Marshall to even get close to 30 points. So give me 21 and give me Western Kentucky 13. Just a lower scoring affair. I think the wind is going to keep some kicks from being kicked, a lot more going forward on fourth down if it's a little situational type stuff. So I like the Herd in a relative tight one. Let's talk about some final thoughts, guys, before we get out of here this week. Trace will bring you back in while Steve's taking a little bit of a break over there. What do you got final thoughts this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to finally get ready for a Marshall game. I mean, it's been freaking forever, it feels like. I mean, it's weird that this season is playing out as it is, considering it's October the 8th at the time of this recording, and Marshall's played 2 games. I mean, that's weird. Usually by this point, they've played 4, maybe even 5 games, all about 4. But it's just weird to see it this long of an in-between time from, the huge win over App State, everybody excited, fan base excited, and then you got to wait forever to play another game. So, it kind of sucks, but, at least they're finally getting to play one. It's on the road, at a rival, best rivalry in the conference, big game for both teams looking for East Division pecking order there. So big stuff on the line here. I hope I can get to go. I might have another lead for ticket situation. I'll say that for y'all later, but we'll see. But hopefully, I mean, whether I'm there or not, I want to see Marshall pull it out. I mean, of course. I mean, and that's the other thing I didn't mention is that, like you said, Grant Wells, this is his first road game as a starter. I didn't mention that, but I did think about it earlier in the day. And I was thinking back at a lot of Marshall notable quarterbacks' first road starts haven't always been the prettiest. So who knows? He might come out and stink it up. I don't know. But plus, I mean, the only thing that I would say that would go against that is the fact Marshall can run the ball as well as they can. I think that will help him, even if he's having a rough game. I think that if they can run the ball like they are capable of doing, then they'll be in pretty good shape. So we'll see, but it's.
The universe does not like Trace's final thoughts, so he got cut off early. He's having a little bit of trouble up with that West Virginia internet, that historic slow band, narrow band internet. But, hey, it's been frustrating him all evening. He's been powering through it. Steve, come back in here. Let's give us some final thoughts on the game, the trip, the weekend, the whole 9. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, super excited. I mean, like you kind of open with, this is the game that, your account, our podcast kind of revolves around, is talking about previewing, talking about the strengths, weaknesses, players, depth, and just everything that kind of captivates to this game this week. Really looking forward to being on campus, even if it's not in a tailgating capacity, but getting to see some people, hang out with some people. I know we've got some invites already out there to go shake hands and kiss babies. So we're gonna bounce around. We're gonna see people, and just really, hopefully have a good time. Stay dry, meet some fans and followers, and hopefully just see a good ball game. Win, lose, or draw. I'm more concerned about the experience and just having fun. If Western wins, so be it. I'll love it. If they lose, it's not gonna ruin my day or my weekend like it used to in my younger years. So looking forward to a good game and good weekend.
Well, me too. And I've got to say that now the experience of the weekend far outweighs the final score of the game for me, because honestly, it doesn't bother me one way or the other. I hope for a really competitive quality rivalry game, and we've seen that for the last few years. They've been instant classics. The last two in particular were absolutely instant classic games. You could watch them even if you're not a fan of Western or Marshall and go, wow, that was a really good game. Those came down to the last second. Another thing I want to talk about is this trip to Bowling Green. I said it before, everybody is always so awesome when I go there. I really like coming back to Bowling Green. I wish I could do it more often than, once every couple of years just for a football game. But, I'm quite a ways away now, and it takes a little bit of logistics to get there. But I'm absolutely looking forward to being there. We're going to come by, and everywhere we've, had an invite tossed out, I want to shake hands. I want to bump elbows, whatever you guys are comfortable doing. I want to do that. I like meeting people. I like meeting the people that help us grow and support this Twitter account, that are helping us listening to this podcast, downloading and subscribing and helping us build that. And I've also got to talk about the scholarship campaigns. Look, man, these things are really starting to gain traction, and I'm glad that a lot of people are starting to take notice of what we're doing. We talked about that this evening on the Red Towel Radio Show, and I'm glad they're helping us get the word out. But the bottom line is you've got to help with a donation, and I don't care how you do it, and I don't care how much it is, but you got to help us do that. We can talk about it and talk about how cool it is, and man, that's really awesome what you guys are set up, and you want to do this, but words are words, guys. We can't endow scholarships with words. We got to do it with money. So even if it's $5, I think people think I'm joking when I say that. Send me $5. Donate $5. Don't send it to me. Donate the $5 to the daggone campaign and put us $5 closer. I don't care. Look, I did the math earlier. And if everybody gave $1 and about 15 cents for every seat, well, just $1.15 for every seat at the Houch, we meet the goal. If we give 65 cents for every seat at Jones C. Edwards Stadium, we meet that goal. It's that easy to do. I know $25,000 sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about a couple of thousand people chipping in, it doesn't take a lot of money to do that. So help us out wherever you can. And I don't care how you want to tie this donation, your support, to the rivalry. Like I said on Red Towel Radio, if you want to donate the jersey number of your favorite player, do that. I don't care what it is. We just need those donations to help us do this. The HAF and the Big Green are counting on us to meet these goals and help them and endow a scholarship for them. Where else are you going to be able to make a $20 one-time donation and have something live on in perpetuity forever? And you're directly benefiting the athletes that we love so much, the people that are putting the product on the field that we get to go watch, that we get to talk about, and that play such a big part in our lives. So again, I mentioned Red Towel Radio before. I got to thank those guys one more time for having me on. I had an absolute blast doing that segment. And I'll be honest, I record a podcast every week, and I was nervous, man. I was like so scared that I was going to start rambling or whatever. It was just such a different animal. And I can get on here and it's no big deal. It's like I'm talking to my buddies, because I am talking to my buddies. Another thing to look for this morning, I did another interview, and there will be an article up on herdzone.com. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not, but by the time this episode gets published, the article will be up. It's going up in the morning. So appreciate Marshall for reaching out and writing a featured article on the Marshall Moonshine Throwdown campaign that we're doing for them as well. And one last bit of news. The fellas up in Canada who have adopted the herd this year because of the cancellation of the CFL schedule reached out to me while I was on the Red Towel Radio Show and asked me if I could make some time to be on their show in the morning. So KD is going on Canadian sports radio to talk about Western Kentucky and Marshall. How awesome is that? We're international, guys. I mean, we're international.
Oh yeah.
I've been telling you for years, we've had downloads of the podcast all the way over in France and stuff. So we were already kind of international, global, but now on a talk stage, we're gonna go north of the border and talk about the Moonshine Throwdown and what it means to us. So you can follow that account. Those guys at Marsh and Mello, MARSHANDMELO are the guys, and the account you'll want to follow is at TSN1150. Canadian radio station. So looking forward to that. I got to set an alarm because it's out of my sleep cycle right now. But I'm going to set a special alarm just to wake up, try not to be groggy, to have a little fun first thing in the morning. Last thing I've got to say before we get the hell out of here is I'd like to thank Monograms and Moonshine for sponsoring now the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Seems kind of fitting. She is the exclusive seller of Moonshine Throwdown merchandise. So if you want to order a Moonshine Throwdown t-shirt, or if you want any other type of custom t-shirt or apparel, please follow her and DM her on Twitter, or go to her Etsy shop for Marshall and Western Kentucky inspired designs. All proceeds from any Moonshine Throwdown t-shirt apparel purchase, any profit from those sales will go directly to the fundraising scholarship campaign of the school for the shirt that you bought. That is what we're going to do until those goals are met. So if you don't want to make a flat out donation, buy a Moonshine Throwdown t-shirt, and every bit of the profit from that will go into that account to help endow that scholarship. How awesome is that? So fellas, I'll see you on Saturday. Trace, I better see you on Saturday. Steven is going to drive to Huntington Hurricane and drag you to Bowling Green if you don't make it. So until we can get a wrap up, it's here, guys. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Take us out of here one last time before the game.
Go Tops.
Go Herds.
It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. We'll see you next week. Later.
Screw the internet.